Well, hello everyone. This is Mark Woolner, the Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank, welcoming you to another episode of the Indiana Bond Cast, which is Indiana Bond Bank's podcast for local units of government. And we are in our Days of Our Cyber Lives series. Today we have episode 13 with our guest Tad Stahl. Tad is the Executive Director of the Indiana Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which we have a great acronym for, of course, in state government. And we're also joined by our favorite guest, returning guest, Shatrice Mosley Romero. You'd think I would get your name right after the first 12 episodes, Shatrice, but wait till the penultimate episode to start botching things. So
it's okay. I understand. 13, lucky 13, Tad. You're lucky 13.
That seems appropriate.
That's right. This does seem sometimes to be kind of a bleak podcast. We talk about everything that can go wrong with cybersecurity threats, it's all the warm and fuzzies. So
yeah,
welcome to the program.
At that point, you just got to laugh at yourself. So
absolutely, we're good at that. And it is good to have two experts, and I do get to fill the role of just kind of local government perspective or average citizen, sometimes asking the questions that they may have. And so Tad, welcome, and Shatrice, I know you and Tad work closely together. If there's anything you'd like to say before we just jump right into ISAC or to some of the work that Tad does, please feel free to make it.
Yeah, I'm super happy Tad's here. He's the guy I'm like, and anybody talks about our information sharing, I'm always like, Tad's the guy. Good background. He'll be way more modest than he probably should be. Previous CISO of the state, so he definitely knows the technology side of things and how it all works at a high level, executive level, enterprise level, and then all the way down to agency level with his background. And now he continues the passion that we all talk about on this series, which is local government and how to help the people who need it most. And so, with that, I think Tad can most certainly kick in on what he does and his background. And, he's the head of the Indiana ISAC. And so, I think it's just nice to put a familiar face on YouTube if you're watching from there, or a familiar voice to the big state government, Indiana ISAC, which is really not scary at all. So.
Well, thank you both. Appreciate the kind words and the welcome. The IN-ISAC stands for the Indiana Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And we're not a big organization. We're part of the Indiana Office of Technology, so we do have those resources to bear. And as Shatrice said, we're really looking to see how we can take and leverage state resources and other resources to the benefit of local governments. Because I think if you look at their situation, if you look at the history, they are definitely straight in the crosshairs of the bad guys these days. And it's kind of the perfect storm of, if you recall, before ransomware, just 4 or 5 years ago, wasn't a whole lot of risk because individual counties at the time, what we had to worry about, or municipalities, we were mostly worried about identity and identity theft. And all of a sudden they stumbled on this way to hold all data hostage and really deny service to citizens, and local governments were then a ripe target for that. A lot of times they don't have deep cybersecurity expertise on site and are busy trying to keep the lights on, and that kind of creates this perfect recipe that hackers are looking to capitalize on. And so from an outreach standpoint, Tracy Barnes and Hemant Jain, our CIO and CISO respectively, have made a real commitment in regard to outreach. And I was fortunate to just get another resource. Taylor Hollenbeck has come on as our Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. And, it's full speed ahead for the IN-ISAC to see how we can get out there and help local governments with their cybersecurity needs. So real excited about it in the future.
Well, that's fantastic, Tad. And so from a layperson, it's ISAC's information sharing, and then there's this analysis component. And can you kind of break down, are those the two vectors, or is there kind of what does the work entail? And then what do you do with kind of that data and analysis?
Yeah, we're more right now emphasizing the information sharing, the state as the anchor tenant. I guess you could say the analysis is that is right now the extent of our raw data analysis, and that we can take and look and see what type of attacks are affecting Indiana government down to the bits and bytes level. And we can take that information, and if we feel like there's a threat that we're seeing that would benefit local governments to know about, we can take that information and share it out. The other type of analysis is just trying to put ourselves in the shoes of those local governments and take, the information from organizations like the multi-state ISAC, from CISA, from the FBI and other reputable sources, and say, hey, this is something that pertains to you, and be that filter, because there's so much cyber information that comes out that I think, especially for those people that are busy doing other things or don't have a cybersecurity background, it's extremely hard to weed out what is important and what isn't. And so we try to play that role to a degree, and get them stuff that hopefully our objective is to, when we send something from the IN-ISAC, that it's viewed as something they should take a look at and at least consider, because it's probably going to apply to them.
Yeah, I really love that component of ISAC. If for listeners, you probably have heard of, like, especially like, for example, the clerk's offices in county governments, they've heard a lot about the elections ISAC, and they have energy, and they have finance, and they have these healthcare, and the critical infrastructures typically have their own pockets of information sharing within their industry. But sometimes it gets really hard to decipher when and what point does that really affect the small businesses, because a lot of times you're coming across information that is for the big companies, right? Because they're the ones that typically have the staff to be able to collect the information to share in the first place. So it's really hard to decipher if you're, especially if you're just an IT person in a county government, which is a lot of the case, right? There's not a lot of security officers, especially in the rural government section, so you really are depending on, what's the information that I need to know specifically because it affects me, and then what do I need to do with that? And I think, especially with the value that Indiana ISAC is able to provide, who better understands our local governments than Indiana people, right? And so, as Tad's developed this program over the last few years, significantly, I think it's really moved into a real value add for information sharing, not just to share information, but to understand the information. And, I think as we go into understanding what we do and what is the, of course, we all want to know what happens when we have a bad day and who to call and what we need to do, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But, but I think if anything, people really do generally want to do the right thing, but sometimes they just don't know what they don't know. And so, I think that's the best value add that Tad and his staff are doing, is kind of being able to figure out of all that noise, what do you really, and you only have 15 minutes a day to pay attention to this out of the 3 jobs you're also taking care of. What do you need to know that day? And I think that's the significant value of just getting rid of some of that noise and being able to have some focal points, right, Tad? I mean, I think that's a big point.
Yeah, I agree.
So Tad, if I'm new to local government, I'd say like new public library director, for example, is this something I would look to opt into or sign up for a newsletter? How would I get, how would I avail myself of the ISAC resource to make sure I'm getting kind of that filtered information from a trusted source about what's out there?
Yeah, well, right now, depending on the topic, I mean, we have a newsletter that's a news brief, and they can find that out on our website under services. That's more of a cybersecurity awareness for business and IT folks, meant to be a little bit of fun and take some of the dryness out of cybersecurity. It can get extremely repetitive at times, and so if you ever want to shake up, even though I end up talking about ransomware a lot, sometimes it's nice to talk about some other type of cyber crime. ransomware all the time. But the newsletter is fun. If they're looking for help, they can go to the website. We've got my phone number down there and my email address. And one of the things I tell people, my truck's got 280,000 miles on it, and I'm looking for trips to get out there and push it over 300,000. So the more they call, the more I'm ready to go. Have keys, will travel. And it really is good to get out there and just touch, make face-to-face acquaintances and be able to talk with them about cybersecurity at a high level. I don't go overly deep these days, but we can point them in the right direction, and the state provides that kind of service at no charge. So we're always anxious to do that. That's the fun part of the job.
Yeah. I'm still stuck at the fact that you said cybersecurity can be dry. I don't understand. Is it dry?
Well,
Like-
you start to see Dark Side and Revel and
Right.
they all run together, and
They all
it's
do.
all the
Yeah, I
same
agree.
methodology, and they're all, the bad thing is they're all taking advantage of people, and at times it just seems like the same old, and you just kind of like to find something a little bit different to talk about in a newsletter. So
Yeah, no, and I would attest to it. I get a lot of information in my email box for just having my role, and his stuff always kind of makes me giggle. You do a good job at making it creative and fun, and there's always a play on words, and it's very punny for any of those people who just love puns. I've even had my little kid, he loves reading your stuff because he's nerdy and he likes to read the newsletters I get.
Good.
So I'm just trying to drive that, because with as much money as cyber people can make, I'm hoping he's going to be he's going to be my cash cow for my retirement, but who knows, right?
Well, Shatrice, it's just kind of easy for people to become numb to it. And
Oh, yeah.
once you become numb to cybersecurity because you read about it so often,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe you start becoming powerless, and that's not the case. I mean, it's a tough business, but you're not completely powerless. And there are some things you can do to insulate yourself from the worst case situations, and a lot of times those actions, it can seem overwhelming when you look at it at once. It's kind of like that mountain. You just have to start climbing it one step at a time, or you're never going to get there. And one of these days, if you do start that climb, you're going to look down and see that you're a long way up, and that's just kind of the process you have to go through.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, one step at a time.
There you go. Great analogy. Shatrice, you mentioned one of the things Tad wanted to talk to us about was the incident reporting and some of the new state, I guess there are new state requirements. This is something Tracy talked to us on the podcast about, I think right before legislative session kind of started. And it sounds like that bill is successful. So I don't know, Shatrice, Tad, if you want to jump in and maybe set the stage, refresh on kind of what we're even talking about, and then kind of dive in from there.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's important to understand the reason for the legislation, and much like what Tracy said, it really is most certainly not Big Brother wanting information just to have it and then use it. There's no gotcha in this. There's no anything, and I know sometimes there are other really bad experiences over many years. People are typically in government because they're serving that bigger notion of their community, so they've been in it for a while, and as technology is advanced, so has collection of information and data, and sometimes good experiences with that, and sometimes bad experiences. This is most certainly is not made to be a bad experience. I think on the worst of the days where people are going through a ransomware attack, or they're going through significant breaches, or just something just stops working and they don't really know what's happening. It's important to know your resources, and the state recognizes that one of the things that we can do better in is to be able to point people to those right resources. And I think we've done a really good job over the last several years, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, that's going to be like our state's mountain, right? Like, how do we get to the peak where we're really assisting everyone along the way? But the first thing we need to do, I talk to local governments. I know Tad talks to local government a lot. And then Mark, the reason why we did this from the get-go under, the advisement of the treasurer is, we're really wanting to figure out how can we help people on these really bad days, and how can we do it long term. I mean, something bad happens and we're being reactive, that's one thing, and it is what it is, but there's so much in cyber, to Tad's point, of little things you can do to really get ahead and make it not the worst case scenario. So when governments, local governments, municipalities come to me or come to Tad, go to Tracy as our CIO of the state, and they're saying, this is a real problem, we don't know what to do with it, we know it's important, we don't know how to attack it, we're getting attacked. You hear that so much and you're thinking, well, we need to know the numbers, we want to help you, but how much help do you need? And so be able to define it a bit better, to be able to quantify it a bit better, so that we can move our resources accordingly. If that means there needs to be more people in Tad's section, which I'm sure he'd be very open to, hint, hint, Tracy, if he's listening. But, and they're working on that, but, it's a component of like, where do we need it? Do we need funds? Do we need programs? Do we need contracts that we discussed on the podcast, as far as, sharing resources, big resources that otherwise would be too expensive for local governments to do on their own. These kind of things all take a lot of time, but at the end of the day, we have to also figure out the business side of it. And so to be able to quantify it, track it, and then also have good points of contact for the local governments, so that when we do need to share information quickly, so that they can get ahead of something and not maybe have more bad days, that then we need to have the ability to do that. So enter in 1169. Which, I know that Tracy, our CIO of the state, talked about. I know Hamath, with our CISO of the state, talked about, our security officer, and, that all tracks down to Tad, who is the section of IoT that actually is implementing and assisting local governments in understanding the law and reporting to. So, I mean, with that, Tad definitely, he's the go-to person to understand those things. With that, I hand it off to Tad as far as, what he's seen so far, and the dates. I know that a lot of times July 1st is the deadline, but I know that the September 1st was another deadline, or I guess another initiation point from that. So maybe that's some clarification on that, Tad, or know, what the law is specifically, who it applies to, and what we need to do with it. Asking for a friend.
well, yeah. The 1169 is a lot of what Shatrice was saying. It's a way for us to gather information. Before, most of the time, we learned about incidents in local governments when everybody else did, through the paper, and that was pretty much only those catastrophic type cases, such as ransomware. And there's a lot more going on typically that probably won't shut down business or require a public notification, but they can be very damaging as well. And so I think it was quite visionary to put this in place. And as Shatrice said, we're not trying to be Big Brother, but I think we are getting a feel for, through the yearly reporting, which started July 1st, that there's a lot of incidents affecting organizations in the state, and to their credit, some are stopping them, some are recognizing them. It's nice to see the reports of things that they recognized and stopped, and then we do get the cases where they were unable to stop it, and they faced negative ramifications from it. So, a couple of the things that we've seen, we knew ransomware was a problem, and we've had a few of those reported, and we've also seen business email compromise, and business email compromise is kind of a con man scheme of sorts, using email typically, and that is another one that can be very costly. I think there was a town in New Hampshire reported last month that lost $2.3 million to a business email compromise, and so very damaging. But the encouraging part of that is for those people out in locals, business email compromise is the easiest fix you could imagine. You just have to take a look at your processes and inject a manual step. Doesn't require anything other than discipline, and you can stop business email compromise. And ransomware is a little more sophisticated, but if you have good backups, at least you have an opportunity. But that's the type of thing that if we can look at that and see that information, we can start to dial up plans that can assist locals through information sharing and possibly other means. Just real quickly, one of the things that we didn't foresee, we've had two different situations where the people that reported incidents to us were able to turn around and in one case provide us with indicators of compromise that we turned around and shared out with the population of contacts that we have. And then another case where we had an organization talk about how they had stopped a business email compromise, and they actually detailed it out for us, and then we shared that. And that's pretty powerful when it comes from a peer organization. And so that's the type of benefit just by looking at the incidents reported that we've been able to turn around and hopefully show some value from this up front, without, again, being big brotherish.
That's amazing. Those are probably the types of things that would have been handled internally, right? And
Yeah.
maybe give yourselves pats on the back and you move on and probably would have no reason to share that. And that is the information I think across local governments is, as you said, it's easier to learn from each other sometimes than hearing it, from the state side.
Yeah, and I think it's more powerful when it comes from your neighbor, rather than somebody, a couple states over or a couple countries over. So
Yeah. And it's not meant to be a shameless in any capacity either. We're not sharing the information, we may be sharing, indicators of compromise as, when people put that together, it's basically, hey, this is what kind of looks like it attacked us. So you may want to look in your systems and see there. That doesn't require that the victim of that cybersecurity attack is shared, but it does help your neighbor. And so, it's kind of, I always kind of think of the ring, the good old ring, doorbell ring, right? And they part of that, they have a neighborhood alert, and it doesn't say, Shatrice is reporting that somebody tried to get in her car. It's saying, hey, neighbor 23 said that somebody was walking around their car and try to get in. You may want to look at your stuff and make sure that you're locking your car and that you're, putting it in the garage and you're paying attention as well. And if maybe you see this person that they describe, you can also let the police know, and then maybe they can get them. I think that's really what we're trying to do. It's really like a neighborhood alert system, right? Like, hey, when this is happening, tell us, and then we're able to tell our neighbors in a confidential way, so they don't even know it's happening to you. And then you don't have to worry through the external concerns that people have typically when sharing their cybersecurity, issues. So it allows people to safely share and do it with a trusted source. That, we're the state, we're not here to gain any net profit out of it. We're not here to benefit outside of just understanding the numbers to figure out how we can help people, that need it the most. And I think that's truly, coming from, the CIO of the state and all of IoT and just the state of Indiana. I mean, that really is what we're wanting to do here. We're not wanting anything more than that. So, I think that's a good kind of component of understanding why we're doing that. So,
yeah, I think it's a testimonial to the kind of the Hoosier mentality. When we went to the people that reported the incident, we did so on rare occasions. Most of those we just investigate, look, see if there's anything that would benefit others from it. But on these two cases, we did broach to the reporters and said basically, hey, your duty's done. You've reported. That's all that's required. Would you have an interest in taking your expertise and your experience and benefiting others? And in some cases, incidents are a raw time. I've been through them, and you don't feel like doing much other than maybe looking for a punching bag. But it's to their credit, both of these organizations came back and said, yeah, we'll do that for you. And we were very appreciative. They did not have to do that. We did not, there was no force applied or anything like that. That was done out of their own determination. And I think they should be proud of that. That's kind of community spirit we're hoping to see thrive here in Indiana from a cybersecurity perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
That says a lot. I think for our listeners, if you had about 24, 25 minutes for Shatrice's analogy of the podcast, then pat yourself on the back or collect your winnings at the window. The 1169 as what the neighborhood watch / ring.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, go ahead and mark that bingo on there. Yep.
Bingo card.
So although I do say I do feel like I'm a bit on edge because Tad is a bit better at the analogies than I am. So so I still feel the mountain one is better than the ring one. So I'm probably going to take that, Tad, and use that in the future. So
Tad, what kind of questions are you getting from, I don't know, I assume the associations have put this out to their members, like Accelerating Indiana Municipalities, AIC for the counties. They're very, very good at sharing new laws that'll impact their members. And I'm just curious, what questions are you getting? Have they changed over the last couple of months as people see it's not maybe the big bad hairy wolf that they thought it was? And are there other questions you're seeing that people listening here might benefit from?
That's a great question, Mark. I mean, we first things we had were, when do we start reporting incidents, which was July 1st. And the second one was, when do I have to have my contact information in, which was September 1st. And we've got over 400 so far that have signed up, and we're grateful for that. We've got some that probably need to get their name in yet, but I'm sure they'll come along here in due time. Some of the questions is, do I have to have a report? And that kind of goes to the language in the legislation, which reads, I'm going to read it directly here, means municipal corporation or special taxing unit, or special taxing district. Now, that's how it's defined. I think that's where the questions come in, and that's where my expertise stops, because I think some of the people that or some of the organizations that need to comply are obvious, but some things such as libraries and hospitals, they've been signing up, and that's typically where the questions come from. I think other things that we have encountered are, just sort of what is my requirement to report, and we've tried to make the form as easy as possible so that they can go in, and kudos to the people that have reported. They're doing an excellent job with the reports, very thorough, very detailed, and they're taking it serious. So that's a good thing. And I think for the most part, with where we're at right now, that is from people reporting incidents, that's been the majority of the questions so far.
Yeah. I know one question I've received, Tad, and I'm curious is, what do you do when you get that report? Like, will you contact them? Will they, another question I get was, does that mean the state's going to help me with my incident if I'm reporting it? And so those are the top questions I've gotten, and as far as like, what do you do with the information? And then does that mean you're going to be helping me?
Well, the state, the state doesn't have an incident response capability directly that we could look at somebody and say, we're going to be there within 2 hours and we'll help you get through this incident. That's not what this system was set up for. Now, I do think that if they're in desperate straits and they want to make a call to the state, and that can go, via their local law enforcement, state police, to IoT, the IN-ISAC, wherever they have a contact, they're going to get a friendly voice as soon as it's available. We want to help. We can point them in the right direction. We may not be able to send out somebody that can do forensics on the spot, which may be exactly what they need, but we can direct them on where they can, perhaps make their own decisions in that regard. And so that's the breakdown. It would be nice if at some point, there is a central incident response mechanism. Most organizations today use their insurance company, and that's good that they have that. And there's a couple of other resources, such as the multi-state ISAC, that have 7x24, capabilities for their members, and everybody in Indiana can be a member. So there are alternatives out there, and we can help, especially with a call ahead of time. That's probably in just one of the basic risk assessment type of things. Keep it simple. Who are you going to call?
Mm-hmm.
And when you call, what is your expectation from that? Because unless you find a service dedicated to that type of incident response, it may be 24, 48 hours, and that's not going to be fast enough. So you need to make sure that response time. So in regard to that, Shatrice, we don't have that guaranteed type of incident response capability.
Yeah, but I like that you
another
said.
Question in there too.
Yeah, well, and I like to that point though. I like what you said though, because we may not have the hands-on keyboard response, but we most certainly are knowledgeable enough to get you to the right people to get you help. And if you haven't been able to figure that out or find that out through your insurance or with your local law enforcement, with our local on our website, because that's my obviously 13N, got to throw in the www.ht or sorry in.gov/cyber, and that you can find on the top. You can actually, there is a button for IN-ISAC there. They have their own sub-site. That's good. It has a lot of their resources as well, and they have their own website. But with the incidents, it's the basic figuring out who you're going to call. If it's a cyber crime, local state police, FBI still say you should call you should call law enforcement, whoever that is. If that's the sheriff in your county, if that's your state police, if that's FBI, if that's Secret Service, whoever you call will get routed to the right people no matter what. And then you're considering, if you are a local government, then you have this requirement as well. And you have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it within 48 hours of the incident is what the law states to report the incident to the states?
Yeah, that's the incident reporting window.
Yeah.
And that's tough. We do appreciate the fact that that's a stressful time, a busy time, but the objective from that is, if we see one, maybe we can find some threat information that we can get out there and share. But I think if we were to ever see a different type of event on scale, and we notice 2, 3, and 4 coming in, if that was our first recognition of that, then we might recognize the fact that a different type of attack was coming our way, something that was boundary specific to maybe either a county or a region in Indiana, or maybe just the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that is to being able to know that information. And then if you're stuck at that point, then, we have the website with a lot of information if you don't want to talk to somebody, or, we have Tad with his 280,000 miles on his car ready to know. But he is a friendly person to call and say, hey, I'm having this really bad day. What else do I need to do? Because sometimes people just need a reminder, right? Like, hey, have you contacted your regulator? Oh, no, I haven't done that. Let me go contact my regulator. Or, hey, I had somebody contact me and they were like, they were asking about this. And I was like, here's, if what we can do is just send them an email with the link, and that helps them, 15 minutes, an hour of stressing about it, then, we all have been in crisis modes, whether personal or professionally. Those few minutes count, and we want to just be there to help with that at the very least. And I think that that's a great value add the state hasn't had before, that we have now for local governments.
Yeah, I think just it's you almost feel the need, because you want to help people so bad, to almost apologize for not having the capability. But the truth is, you can only do so much at one time. And so, if you're going to call to the IN-ISAC at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, I'm not going to be there to take that call. And that's that's just as important to know, maybe, or set that expectation as not. But the thing that I think is important is, with a little bit of planning, whether I help with that or somebody else helps with that, you can plot that out very quickly, and you can do a quick tabletop or just an exercise in thinking out loud and saying, I'm going to go to this number and they'll be there 7/24 if I have an incident, and this is where I'm handing it off to, and these guys are going to send in, the troops, and they're going to help me. This is where we go. This is step one if we have an incident,
Right.
and that's important, and it's doable.
Yep, absolutely.
That's fantastic. I think as you've both spoken, I think about the things that we'll want to post with the podcast, which will be certainly the incident reporting website. And then Tad, if there's anything else about ISAC that you think in terms of links, information that we ought to post with the podcast, certainly let us know, and that'll be up. If you're listening, it'll be up with the link on our website. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description of the podcast, the video podcast that you're watching. And so please take advantage of those links and resources, because as Shatrice said, it's the last thing you want to do is be searching around for things like that when you're in a crisis. So just take those off the podcast, bookmark those, make sure you've got them available. And Tad, it is so great to have you as a resource at the state. I'm glad we got to meet here. I just feel each of these, I know it's a heavy topic, but I feel better kind of ironically every time just by the folks who are working in this field in the public sector, supporting the public sector, supporting our local governments to help combat the cyber crime that's going on. So thank you for your work, your service, and thanks for breaking down kind of a meaty topic in a very understandable way.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you both for inviting me. And if you ever get tired of Shatrice's analogies, I've got a great one where I play LeBron James. It's a hacking analogy, and I win every time. So I'll use that as a teaser for the next time. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
I love it.
I love that.
Well, I only need to come up with one more, right? One more analogy.
Next, yeah. So for folks who are watching and listening, Tad is actually our last official guest of the program. Next episode marks our 14th and ultimate series finale. I guess it's the series finale, we can call it, for the Days of Our Cyber Lives podcast series. So we will be going back in the archives. State Treasurer Kelly Mitchell will be joining Shatrice and myself as we try to kind of, I think, recap some of the best moments we've had on the show, and also maybe try to, figure out what we all learned by doing this. And the topic never gets old. I suspect we'll be talking about cybersecurity often here on the Bondcast, but for a series, it's a good time. To take a break and recap where we've been. So
yeah,
thanks.
I'm excited about it. And sad to see the series end, but I think we've done a really good job, and so much of the information in the series with the guests that we've had, this one, for example, you can listen to this one 6 months from now, and it's still going to be the same spirit of what we're wanting to do at the state of Indiana. The law is not going to change in the next 6 months, so that's still applicable. So I definitely recommend anybody who's listening to go check out the other 12 episodes as well, because I think a lot of the information still applies as far as those kind of small little, tips and tricks to get ahead of some stuff. But more importantly, or as importantly, the things to keep in mind to know. And I think the biggest thing that we'll want to walk away is we have people like Tad and his staff and Tracy and Hamath and myself at the state who really, really are here to try to help local government do their job the best they can. And if we can alleviate some of that's what is cybersecurity and how do I do it a little bit, then I think we've done a good, we're doing our job in that sense. So
if nothing else, go back and watch the videos for all the pandemic haircuts that we had or didn't have. Or
right. Yes, exactly.
There's some shaggy ones in there of me didn't go out of the house for weeks on end. But
yeah, I think at one I looked a little tired because I was going on like the 5th day straight of doing 4 kids virtual school and work, and I think I mixed work and school in there somewhere. I don't know how, but it was an analogy though. I think it was just pure exhaustion. But I think I most certainly am not the only parent who felt that during the pandemic. So
well, thank you all. For the Indiana Bond Bank and State Treasurer's Office, this is Mark Woolner signing off and saying thank you to our local governments. We are here to support. Love presenting this podcast for you. And thank you to our guests again, Tad Stahl and Shatrice Mosley Romero. And we'll talk to you next time on the Indiana Bondcast.